What are the worst things you can do in your 20s? Worst thing, and they're in no particular order, but one really bad thing you can do in your 20s is purely rely on your degree. Purely rely on your college degree or your school education. It's by now not a secret anymore. School doesn't really teach you valuable things when it comes to entrepreneurial stuff, wealth creation, becoming richer than the average. School is good at making you a normal, obedient citizen who does what everybody else does, who will be a good worker, who will serve the government, serve the tax office. But if you want to make 10 times more than anybody else, if you want to make 100 times more than anybody else, zero from that you will be taught in school. You have to figure that out by yourself. So please don't rely on a degree. You will be Second thing, very bad, is staying stagnant. So that means staying in the same city, staying in the same job, staying in the same relationship for basically longer than 2 years in your 20s. I highly recommend changing stuff. And yes, you heard me right, I also said relationship. You will regret staying in a relationship for longer than 3 or 4 years in your 20s. Trust me, I've coached hundreds of guys and they all regretted it because the reality is you're still developing your personality. She's still developing her personality. Yes, you started off really well with her. I believe it. It was beautiful time at the beginning, but I know it usually goes down after 2 or 3 years, and then it's usually your job as a man to break up. Often guys are too much of a pussy to do so, and then they regret it in their 30s that they spent all their 20s with the same girl, and then they need to catch up making experiences. So if you have that feeling, if you're in a relationship and that resonates, break up. Like, you have to. We can talk more about that in the weekly webinars, but that is my first kind of sign to you. Same with job and location. I've been traveling constantly in my 20s. I've been moving jobs, different companies, and then even inside the same company, I've moved different departments, so to say, from editing to filming to sales and now coaching and now creating courses myself. So obviously, as you can see, the experience compounds, and every new thing you try out will make you a more sophisticated, more complex human, which will then be able to deploy those skills in your 30s much more effectively versus being the one-sided guy who did one thing all his 20s, lived in one place, speaks one language, doesn't know anything about the world, doesn't know anything about different company structures, different softwares, languages, cultures, different ways of handling stuff. So you don't want to get stuck somewhere. Make a plan. When I was 22 and 21, around that time, I had 2 pretty shitty jobs. One was Starbucks, and I did it to be more social. One was working in a hotel at night, and I did it to study at night so I could use the time better for my studies, so I don't need to study during the day, because during the day I wanted to go to Budapest to film and edit for James. And then during class, I wanted to edit the videos. I just filmed on the weekend. So I thought that would all kind of work together. It didn't work out that perfectly. At the end of the day, I didn't have a lot of sleep, but I made some money. Anyway, my point being is, at the first day of taking this job, I already decided I will do this job for exactly 6 months and then I will quit. And both times, exactly after 6 months, I quit the job. It's very easy to start with something and give it a very open end. This is a huge mistake. If I would add another dot on this list, is starting things without the end in mind. That is a big mistake in your 20s. Start something, give it a deadline, and then work really hard and then stop it, or at least reevaluate if it still serves you. Next on the list of things you should not do in your 20s is becoming an entrepreneur. Obviously, we're living in a time where everybody's preaching that you should become an entrepreneur and you should make your own money and you should start your own business when you're 14 years old. Well, there is obviously incredible benefits of having your own company. Me, for myself, I'm a workaholic. I like leading people. I like taking on responsibility. And still, I'm kind of an employee inside of TNL. I'm like an intrapreneur. I think it's a huge mistake to 95% of people or 90% of people to be an entrepreneur, especially by yourself in your 20s. It is much more efficient, much smarter use of time to work for someone else and work in a company, work in several companies. You will learn so much more. Like, isn't it logical? You can work for 1 year at a company that already figured out many things like lead generation, running ads, how they treat customers, how they employ people, how they onboard people, how they fire people, how they solve other problems. You can soak up all that knowledge and then later, of course, use it in your own company in your late 20s and 30s. That's totally fine. I just think it's a bit of a waste of time to trying to figure it all out by yourself in your 20s when you could just do small internships. And again, you shouldn't stay stagnant, but if you're somewhere for a year or two, you can soak up a lot, do that again, and then you will have such an incredible skill set to start being an entrepreneur in your late 20s or early 30s, and you will outcompete all those wannabe entrepreneurs who watch 1 or 2 YouTube videos and they're basically just figuring it out based on very little knowledge. You can see how you have such a big advantage, and ultimately what's the point of being an entrepreneur? It's to serve your customer really well, and the guy who has way more experiences will obviously serve their customers much better, more efficiently, will use the customer's money better, or is able to charge less, and this is the way to outcompete your competition later. Short one, basically being too careful. We talked about it. You have to take risks. You have to get out of what your parents told you. So let's call this one things to avoid in your 20s, listening to your parents too much. Your parents will always tell you the careful thing because first of all, they're a different generation where being careful paid off, because when they bought a house, it was $50,000, which is now $600,000. So small, steadily saving money worked really well for them. Also, they probably didn't face getting fired from a job and then having real difficulty finding another one because the job market was local. Now you're competing with VAs from Philippines who cost $2 an hour. You're competing with programmers from Cairo who are 3 times more educated than you for half of the price. You're competing with other people on a global scale now. So you have to take risks. You have to get ahead. It's not that easy these days. You cannot just rely on one skill, one degree, one job. What if that ends? What if it doesn't work out? You need to build other things, so you have to take risks. The one who is taking risks in that time will win in the long run. So don't listen to your parents too much, please. They mean good, but they don't know shit. They're older than you, they're different generation, they just cannot relate. So be very cautious with advice. They can give you maybe health advice because they're older and they know how things affect their body. Moral advice because they've just ran into way more people and had way more interactions. They can give you probably advice how to raise a kid, but be very careful when it comes to job, money, adventures in that sense, entrepreneurial stuff. Except you have entrepreneurial parents, maybe you do, but I didn't. So be very careful of that, please. Take risks, don't be too safe. Obviously don't be stupid, but don't be always on the safe side. It won't pay off positively. The risky thing to do is to be always safe. The smart, long-term thinking thing is to actually take risks. And the last thing you should not be doing in your 20s is wasting time with anything that is not related to seduction, building your skill, or gaining some experience. That means travel experience, some cool adventures, sexual experience, and so on. Skill relating to some skill that will make you money in the future, or will make you incredible friends, or will build you an incredible lifestyle in the future. And then seduction, well, that is clear. Meeting women, meeting people, talking to people, becoming a seducer. Everything else really is a waste of time. And you can couple things. You can take on a job that will enable you to travel. You can take on a job that will help you with seduction. The worst things are like video games, because you don't learn seduction, you don't learn a skill, and you don't learn life experience. Even stuff like trading, if you're not an incredible trader. You think you make money, but probably you won't. 99% of people don't make money of trading. So you don't learn seduction, you again not building networks and gaining experiences, and you're not really learning another skill that makes you money. I was a pretty good poker player, and I still quit when I was 21 because I knew I'll never make more than 10K a month of poker. And, at that time, not even more than 5K a month. I'm already not going to learn anything more in poker that would help me with anything else. And I'm not meeting any people through online poker. And the people I meet at live poker are like some fat dudes who play on the weekends. So I quit it. I was very clear to me suddenly, although I loved poker, I did make money with it for many years, that it just won't serve me in the future. So focus your time on the things that pay off over a long time. I highly recommend the podcast between Joe Rogan and Naval Ravikant, where he talks a lot about compounding and building networks and stuff like that. Incredible podcast, one of my favorites. I actually have some tattoos with stuff he said there. That's it. That's the things to avoid in your 20s, and that's my general advice for a young guy in his teens and 20s.